So, hi there. My name is Nick Martin. This is Workshop Bank. This is Workshop Bank's inaugural podcast. So I'm really excited to be joined today by Nicolai Andler. Nicolai Andler, is that the right pronunciation? Nicolai Andler.
Yes.
He's consultant, business analyst, author, trainer, lecturer, coach, and outdoors enthusiast. He's founder of the Ignite Group in South Africa and partner at the MC2 Institute in Switzerland. He has a Master's in Science in Chemical Engineering and Commerce from Berlin, an MBA equivalent from Toulouse, certificates in Systems Development and Coaching. He has a book. He's an author, so he has a book on tools for project management, workshops and consulting, which is a bestseller, I believe, having sold over 12,000 copies worldwide, which is fantastic. Which has something like 120 tools and techniques covered. So very interesting for our audience for sure. He's now in the process of writing another book, which we'll talk about a little later on. So welcome to Workshop Bank, Nicolai.
Thanks very much for having me.
No worries at all. So like me, you have a degree in chemical engineering. But
I didn't know that. Okay,
You decided.
I do. Never really used much, but I do.
Yeah, and like me, you've never really. Is there something about not wanting to work on an oil platform for the rest of your life that?
Well, funny enough, the reason I became a chemical engineer, not a mechanical engineer, I didn't want to get my hands oily and dirty.
Right.
So you might not see the acid. My hands fall off, but at least not oily.
Right.
No, I quite quickly went actually even during my studies, I was always engaged in management consulting work, and I got a job offer to start, and it was my interest anyway. Okay. So that's the reason.
And you're straight into consulting. So you're mainly based out of South Africa, and you work with the Ignite Group, and we just had a brief conversation. You're mainly working in IT consulting now, is that?
Well, in South Africa, I do a lot of business analysis, business specification work. When I'm working on projects in Europe, I'm doing more organizational management consulting work.
Okay. And so, what industries do you like to work most with?
Well, the management consulting is a bit broader. It's not so much relevant to the industry. I've been just working in the healthcare industry, doing an organizational change project there, defining product and customer bases. Before, I've worked in a IT transformation project for a life insurance company, but it was basically the IT department. And the most recent 2 IT project I've done in terms of specification was actually for an ad agency to define their media management systems.
Okay.
So it's quite broad, although I think I have, not out of choice, but out of project and circumstances, I've worked quite a lot in the financial services industry. So I've covered the retail banks, a bit of the investment banks, spent a lot of time in the life insurance and employee benefits and individual risk areas.
Okay. Looking back on your CV, very soon after you finished your education, you founded your own company.
Yes.
Why was that?
I think I'm a bit of a rebel.
Right, okay.
And I think one of the things I realized, I kind of had 2 companies. I worked first for an international management consultancy, and that was the time just before the internet bubble burst. And then I realized that a lot of companies or management consultancies ignored the IT side, and that's when I then actually joined an IT consultancy to also learn the IT thing. Often it was like, okay, we have a business process, and that's the way how we redesign it, and these are the people, and the IT department must just sort out the systems. And well, nothing was happening because, especially I was working a lot with the financial services companies. The IT is so dominant in those industries that you can change a lot on the business side, but nothing will happen unless you actually have changed the other side as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just actually got a phone call. Sorry.
That's all right. This is real life.
Yes.
Right here in front
must be another client calling. I wish.
Must be. Well, I'm sorry you lost that contract. Apologise from us. So what do you like most? I've done IT consulting and organisational change as well, and they don't tend to go hand in hand. What do you like most? The people or the computers? What do you get most excited with?
It's actually, for me, it's the ability, or not the ability, but the choice. So in an IT world, what I don't do much is actually the project management work, because as a business analyst, I work quite on a risk base. So I often come in and say, well, you pay me deposit and you only pay the rest if you're actually happy with the quality of work. But I can't do that if I'm too involved in the political haggling.
Yeah.
So in an IT environment, I actually enjoy being independent of the people. I work with the people, but I'm very much in control of what needs to be done and delivered.
Yeah.
So the style of working, even the contractual arrangement and the risk level I have is very different. And so this is almost like the engineering mind that's coming through. I can just put my head down, work with the people, extract the requirements, define it properly, have workshops, and define that. On the other side, I enjoy working with people in a process consulting workshop type of environment, where my coaching education also helps to, connect with people and build a rapport. So this is more the organizational change element. And the way I build is even different, because there's so much risk. I mean, my experience is most projects fail not because they can't find a technical solution, because of the people. So I build differently. I build less on a risk base, because I can't guarantee it in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be delays that are just not, might backfire if I say, you just pay me a portion of it and you pay me at the end of the project, and then the project. I mean, I've just been on a project that's I supposed to actually start mid-September, and now due to some organizational issues, it's mostly starting in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like both, and I like having the choice of being able to dive into the more technical element, doing it, fixing it, getting out of it after 3 months, and being involved in more fuzzy, more. It's not that I enjoy the politics, but when I do management consulting, I'm more prepared to live with it and accept it.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess having a balance of the both means that your personal financial risk is evened out as well, because you've got the
yeah. I mean, the IT consulting doesn't pay as well, but it kind of gives me that kind of predictability, planability, versus those long, bigger contracts are much more, in a way, risky, because there's nothing for a lot of time, and then something comes through.
Yeah.
And also, I think almost from I don't want to say work-life balance, but because it's not life opposite to work, but it's like the different type of projects give me a different type of energy.
Yeah.
And the one is more draining, the other one is a bit more nurturing.
Yeah. So let me talk about more of that nurturing stuff. So what is it? What is it you like? What nurtures? What drives you to want to be involved in those kind of nurturing projects?
I think it's the element where I recognize that they're all individual human beings, and helping them to, I don't want to say make them happy, because this is kind of an illusion, but help them to mature and grow and realize what's happening. It might even be that they realize for themselves, the company has moved in another direction, and that direction doesn't suit me anymore. Without the aspect of I'm a bad person, or the company is bad and unacceptable and they're doing bad things. So there's an element of helping a person to find their way or their path, and at the same time also conveying the message throughout the process that, you know what, nobody forces you to work here. I mean, there's often some people in the HR or organization design community might not like what I'm saying now. There's a perception that the consultants come in, do their work, and now often the woman, there's a strong dominance with a woman in the HR or OD domain, come in and look after the handicapped, or kind of the leftover that didn't survive the war. Look after the battlefield. And there's often elements that whenever you have this organizational change development domain attached to your CV or your business card, then you must be doing something touchy-feely stuff. Yeah, it's all about how do you feel now. And I'm saying it's important, but there's much more to that. So when I talk about helping a person, individuals, and the company to grow and mature, it's not a only care on how you feel and poor you. It's really about almost like understanding what the person is going through and still demanding the best of them. So there's a certain empathy with I don't want to say reasonable hardness, but it's a kind of a reality element to that. Because things change. I mean, I don't mean everything changed, but I also say business changed a lot over the years. And I think a lot of people, they're still stuck in their old way of thinking. And it's not the thinking is wrong, but it's maybe not suitable for the environment they're working in. So a lot of what I do is, it's not just holding hands and saying, how do you feeling? And yeah, they must be so bad. And I understand that you don't want to do that. It's also an element of, well, what are your assumptions about work? What are your assumptions about the company? What are your assumptions about your colleagues? And are they still valid? Are they still relevant? And through that kind of, almost like, I don't want to say shake them and make them awake, but make them mature and grow up. And take ownership for their life and their situations.
Okay, that's great. Now, okay, so as you know, the point of these interviews is to try and give our audience actionable, real actions, real process stuff that you do on the front line when you've got a new client and you've got a new customer, so they can copy those steps or learn from them and mold them into their own tools and techniques. So when you have a new client, when you win a new client, you're in there the first day, second day, whatever. What kind of process do you like to go through? How do you like to work with them? How do you approach the start of a project, for example?
Okay, and I can say that actually I do that on an IT project. I do that even in workshops. I do that on any project. Often you kind of get a brief, like a project contract. This is the direction.
Yeah. This is what good looks like.
Yeah. I clarify their expectations. And I do this even when I lecture with students. And there's like that three things that are important doing that. And you can use a flip chart, and then later actually I type it out and I document it and get it signed. But I ask them, and a typical example is some years ago, SAP implementation, plant maintenance, product planning module. And it was an additional module, so there was already SAP installed in a small area, but it was a significant SAP implementation. So we got all the people together, and the project was clear. It's about implementing, defining, implementing, and that module. And we still ask them, so what are your expectations? And then the marketing person says, we'll be able to position ourselves better, so it's actually increased revenue. And HR said, you know what, we'll be actually having a better retention rate, so people leave less quickly because they're not going to be as frustrated. They were always so upset about the system. So with this one, we'll help with the retention rate. And the plant maintenance says, we can now truly track where theft and loss is. So we'll actually save money. I said, I hear you, but your expectation is not realistic. I mean, maybe they were to a certain degree, but this is purely about implementing a system, replacing the old one because of some technical issues with this one. So what I mean with this expectation exchange is it's letting the expectations come out. Second point is manage them, meaning tell them when they are not realistic. Because those people will actually support throughout the project, will actually keep on hoping it finally will deliver this.
Yeah.
And it's almost like going away for the weekend and hoping that something would happen, but it's no.
And it never happens.
It's like you going away with your girlfriend leaving or your wife leaving the kids at home saying, hey, finally, suddenly we'll have a couple weekend together, versus your wife didn't tell you that you invited the grandparents or something. Maybe not the best example. So it's about, well, if you know up front, you can surrender to the circumstances, surrender to the facts. Maybe you're sad or disappointed at that moment, but better now than much later.
And what's your style with that situation? Would you like to manage their expectations down below where you think they can get to, so when they get to the end of the project, their expectations are exceeded, so they feel more positive about the overall process, or do you try and lock them into where you think it's naturally likely to get to?
I'll try to, number one, manage them in terms of what is realistic, what is unrealistic, and rather than focus on, guess what, maybe what other things is the project going to deliver technically without it labeling as this is your expectation, and that's maybe what we should focus on. Okay. Another thing I do there as well, as part of the expectation exchange, I also ask them for their reservations or pitfalls, whatever you want to call them. So often people ask me, so, but Nicolai, aren't you looking for trouble, or aren't you looking at, this sounds so negative, why are you asking them for their negative stuff? And I think, well, it gives me an insight about what to look out for. There was a situation where it says, we had other consultants before and it didn't work, this is just a waste of money, and saying, another consultancy. Great, they must have done work. We can reuse that instead of reinventing the wheel. So great, thank you very much. So I'm almost happy people voice their reservations, because these are the mistakes other people have made before. And I document that, and I actually let people sign it. And at the end of the project, I use something that's called boost balls. Because often when people, when you ask them, so are you happy with the project? They say, yeah, cool. But you can't really measure, fine, not fine, okay. Just picture a circle with a cross. You have 4 segments.
Yeah.
And the two boost balls, sometimes it's called Harvey balls, because the font with it is in the font Harvey. So it comes from Booz Allen Hamilton, the consultancy. So I draw that circle with a cross next to their expectation. So I sit down with them and say, well, listen, at the beginning, 3 months ago, we had this as an expectation, and we changed them, and we crossed out this one, but this one is still relevant. So we agreed this is a realistic expectation. Have you met your expectation? And then I actually, with a marker, I fill out the segments being 25%, or half of them, about 2 of the 4, 50%, 75, or 100. So I quantify something. I turn something qualitative into something quantitative. I can measure that. And if I have 10 stakeholders with 3, 4 expectations each, I can actually measure and put it all together and calculate and say, well, listen, in terms of performance, we have achieved a 67% meeting expectation. So it's not just at the beginning, but actually I use it at the end. Yeah. But in terms of communication, I make them aware, listen, this is what you had at the beginning. How would you see it now? And have we actually delivered on it? And obviously I use that expectation right through for my own, not just communication, but also what I need to focus on. Because you can create a great SAP implementation, but if you're completely ignoring the expectation which you deemed realistic, you're not going to get a high score, and you're not going to get a very happy client. Because it's more than just the technical delivery of a system or something.
I've used the model, rational, political, and emotional dimensions of every project, and in this context, your rational dimension is, do you deliver the system, and is the system up and running at the end of the project? But the emotional and political elements are so much more powerful, and can trip the project up halfway through, or just completely destroy it at the end if you don't manage it. And what you're talking about there with the expectation sounds very much like the managing the emotional journey.
Yes, very much so. I mean, as you said quite rightly, the project scope, project definition is typically one of the elements that is more factual. Yeah. Often that is also not clear. I mean, I would also, as part of the kickoff workshops, clarify that. What I often do there is say, okay, I clearly hear objectives, but for me there are 3 levels. There is a phase, a project, and a business objective. So what is the phase objective of this project? What is the overall project objective? And then okay, we have delivered the project. How is this going to be helpful for the business? So this is actually what really counts, why we're doing this project. But often this is kind of been a bit fuzzy. So when I have a project definition document under my heading objectives, I have actually 3 subheadings. I say business objectives, project objectives, objectives for this phase.
Okay.
To make it crystal clear that there are different levels. And
could you give us an example?
Without revealing too much of my current projects. Okay, I'll give you a project example. It was for a company who is, I definitely can't tell the name because now it's really embarrassing for them. They had no idea if they're making any profit with the product they're selling. So they had no idea about selling it for, let's say, 150 euros a service a day, but they didn't really know if those clients they're selling it to, were they breaking even? At what amount would they break even? Okay. So in February they would basically know how to do for the year.
Yeah. Well, so they didn't know the value that the client was getting, or they didn't know whether they were personally making a profit?
No, actually, they would definitely. They're not knowing for 12 years. During the year, they don't know if they're actually ending up with a profit at the end of the year.
Okay.
Because they had no idea about. Okay, let's charge 150 euros for that service for the day, but they didn't know the internal cost structures.
Okay.
Now they said, well, okay, we should be fine with 150 we should be even. But then for several years now, they had more and more clients. It was in the healthcare industry, and they're still not really breaking even or making a loss. Okay. They were making a loss.
Okay.
So what we did was, we helped them to define basically a costing model for each of their services. And they had many, many services admittedly. They had several hundred services, all building up into a package for the day in a way. Mm-hmm. So what we did, the phase was about cost analysis. Objective for the phase was defining what each service element costs. The overall project was about implementing a costing system, or not just doing the analysis, but actually translating it into their daily system. So when marketing puts something new together, they can actually say, well, we need to pitch this at 190 euros because it costs us 120 or 150 euros. So the phase itself was defining the raw material, the raw data. The overall project, which would be in 3 phases, was actually implementing something, not just in the costing department, for controlling department, also in the marketing and sales department, the relevant information. But the overall business project was preventing that we are in liquidation in 3 years' time because we're running out of, we have some reserves. But it's about, so this was one element. The other element was offering products that are profitable and getting rid of, like cleansing our product portfolio or service offering, and getting rid of the stuff that is not really helping us.
Okay.
Plus, can we do it? Because in the healthcare industry, you have certain kind of obligations. You can't just say to a patient that walks in, sorry, mate, you're not really part of our segment. You're costing us too much. Why don't you find another place?
Yeah.
So there was some strategic long-term development kind of evolving out of this.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not sure if they kind of clear enough. There's 3 different objectives.
No, that made sense. I'd like to dive into a couple of other. Do you have any other tools that you like to you regularly use? With most clients, you're extremely likely to pull it out, whether it's a framework or it's an individual tool.
I have something that all the consultants we train, or even the students we lecture, they like, because it's so simple. Okay, just picture a square or like a rectangle, and within you draw a circle. And I call this the is not. Typically, what people do at the beginning of the project, they define what is it we want to work on. Good. And then you go through the project, and 3, 4, 5 weeks later, you have conversation with the people and they're saying, no, but you also should be doing this. And saying, no, that was out of scope. Yeah, but this should definitely be, that this doesn't belong to out of scope. This is just a sub-element of this. So I had examples where I was talking about a system that was implemented in a warehouse environment, and I had quite a clear scope at the beginning, and I was spending a lot of time in the first weeks just defining and actually writing down, and that's what I do outside the circle. So in the circle, I write down, that's in scope. It's almost like my project charter, deliverables.
Yeah.
And I have tons of words in there. They're not necessarily too scientific. There are people there. It's almost like a context diagram that's in there. Process, systems, everything that's kind of I must look at and I must touch. On the outside world, in the outside this the round circle, I put, and that's even more important, I put all the words, all the elements, all the systems, all the interfaces and processes that are out of scope to make sure. So when I do this, I have a very first version that is not complete. So actually I take the printout with and I walk to different stakeholders and say, listen, just to make sure, is there anything I forgot or I should be either on the inside or the outside? And often it's the sub-elements or it's the implicitly kind of assumptions. And we all know assumptions are the mother of all fuck-ups.
Yeah.
So it's my life insurance on a project. I go back to that page quite a lot.
Yeah.
And at one stage actually get it signed when we're all happy this is really a good representation of what's in and out of scope.
Yeah.
Because typically what we do, we just write down like 4 bullet points that are obvious, that are out of scope. But there's a gray area, and I try to make it almost like I remove the gray. I make it explicit. This is an explicit yes, this is explicit no. And I use that tool a lot. It's super simple. I mean, without even seeing it, you picture it.
Yeah.
And it's more like a communication. All the tools I use are more like communication tools and mental structuring tools. So you don't actually necessarily have to do the drawing, and sometimes people then put it in the table, say left side in scope, outside. I personally prefer drawings, diagrams.
Yeah.
That's one of the tools I definitely use.
And that's a tool for you personally to manage yourself and the project and your project stakeholders through the project.
Yes, absolutely. So in my project definition, I actually have this as a drawing.
Yeah.
And I have a signature on it. And I scan it in and say, listen, this is what at that time, we started with. It might change.
I was going to say, what do you do when it evolves? Because it's going to evolve as people remember. We forgot we forgot this over here. Oh, don't worry about that. Nicolai will deal with that.
Yes, well, I mean, it's difficult. We all know it's not as simple as I kind of make it seem now. Just say, well, listen, just add another 100,000. I'm happy to do that. It's not that simple. Yeah. But at least it gives me that process. I mean, I also have different versions of it, so I can see actually how it evolves. And I say, listen, if we change this, then it has like implications, all kind of other things. You're prepared to change this. In this case, it was actually that in the warehouse project, they realized if they want me to include another, like basically it was a warehouse system, but it was also a supplier system into the warehouse. And I said, well, listen, the supplier should also be connected with this whole thing. And saying, well, I'm happy to do that, but then it's not going to be delivered within the 3 months and not for the price we agreed, because I need another 30 hours more or 30% more. And then they said, okay. And it's really, I make it transparent, but also because I draw it, and then later actually I use context diagrams where I draw in the scope based from that diagram. Then realize, oh, there's a whole lot of more, because then it's like system involved, there's other suppliers involved, other stakeholders. So I make this decision theirs by making it transparent to them. And yes, we all know they still say, Nicolai, you're so good, you'll manage it in time. And saying, well, no, I'm not, otherwise I mean, if you're saying that I could do it anyway, then are you saying I'm wasting my time anyway, or should be finished sooner?
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Okay, reality is it's not that simple as I describe it, but at least it gives me the mechanism to, but listen, you sign this off. Because often, especially when people actually put a signature on there,
yeah,
that's my big lesson.
Yeah.
If you get people to actually physically sign a document, and actually then scan it in, and it's seeing there, they're like, they make double sure before they sign that this is actually correct.
Yeah, absolutely. But that can also drag out the start of the project, can't it? Quite a lot. But whilst people are stepping back and prevaricating over whether they should actually put their pen to paper, whether their boss is going to be happy with the fact that they're putting signatures to something.
Yeah. I mean, it can be. You need to see a bit. I've worked in an environment where it was almost like a management of non-delivery. So nobody was committing to anything. And in one stage, I also walked out because I said, you know what, the risk is just too high for me to continue without having a proper agreement, a proper signed off versions. It all will backfire. And that's when I one stage actually walked out to say it's not. I'd rather be associated with handing over, and getting my deposit back instead of being associated with something that I can't stand for. So it's not always, the tools are no guarantee for success.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's no, absolutely not. I like that tool a lot because it's so simple and so visual that I've seen so many project charters or in scope, out scope documents that are just so wordy that you can't really get a visual sense of what is in scope and what is out of scope without sitting down for 6 hours and reading a document. And to have something all on one page with just a few words on it, it appeals to my simple way of life. What about one more? Have you got another tool that you work with the client actively in a group situation? So you've got a bunch of your stakeholders in front of you, and you're in a workshop situation with a defined objective. Is there a tool you'd like to?
Well, I'm thinking, but I'm not sure. I don't think that's going the right direction. Maybe it's what I'm building on sometimes is actually a stakeholder map. I mean, if you're also at the beginning of a situation, of a project, I also have a physical diagram, and I use a very similar logic. I use also I put boxes on there. The gray ones are the in scope, and the white ones are out of scope. Why do I mention the ones I'm not going to talk to because they're out of scope? Because I don't want to make that decision. So I actually put it out there and says, listen, I got the impression we're not talking to those. We're not talking to unions, not to ad agencies, not to whatever. And they're saying, no, we must talk to them. And saying, well, are you sure? Because then we need to change back our in and out of scope. We need to change back our project objectives. Plus, we also need to involve them in the following workshops. So a lot what I do at the beginning is actually involving them in them making the decisions and the suggestions, and also use that in terms of who am I forgetting. Often when I sit down with those diagrams and I said, I'm sure there's something that's wrong here. I almost like invite people to not to critique me, but I'm not coming there with the attitude of like this is kind of we can, this is printed gold and it's done and delivered and don't touch this. I invite people to say, there's something wrong here. I'm sure I'm missing something. Help me to understand who else should we see and talk to. So it all comes, like there are lots of iterations from one tool to the other because they won't feed each other.
Yeah. And why do you find that inviting them into that process works so well?
Because it reduces, number one, this kind of the consultants out there, they know anything anyway. They're kind of this barrier of consultants must know better. And so my consulting style is I'm not an expert consultant, I'm more a process consultant. And it took me quite some time to really get what it means. So it for me, it's not coming with a solution, it's coming with a way of working. So kind of working through those diagrams is the process. And I'm not defining, I don't have a very clear picture of the end result in mind, because then I would almost like drive them and use them. I'm saying, well, I have a contract, I have a task to do here, and this is the end objective. And with the process, let's clarify if this actually still holds true. I had projects where after 3-4 weeks, I went back to the stakeholder and saying, well, listen, you initially told me that this is the issue and that's why we're implementing the system, or you want me to do certain things. I can do that, but we're not going to make a change at all. So we found actually the root cause is something else, and we found it through your employees. They actually pointed it out. So do you still want me to seriously? I mean, I'm happy to continue doing that because we make money, but I'm just telling you, better stop this and let's sit all together and realign where we want to actually go. So bring the people in creates that ownership right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even how you dress. I mean, I try to like rather underdress than overdress.
Yeah.
I have this, you know, when you're at the airport or at the central station, you can spot the consultants.
Yeah.
And I try to not overcome this, but just diffuse those two walls that actually, those two groups that bang at each other, and then it's about being right.
Okay. So when you're standing up in front of them, your demeanor is saying, you know, I'm not going to tell you what the final solution is going to be. You're going to be you have the power to decide that. I'm just going to help you get there. Yeah.
There's maybe another tool that's quite useful in terms of communication. It's called Vroom Yetton.
Okay. Not heard.
VROOMYETTON.
Okay.
I mean, it's a concept, but it's I found it quite useful for managers, and I also use that sometimes. It's basically you communicate what is out there, or what is to be discussed, and what's open for debate and what's not open for debate. Okay, let me rephrase that. Sometimes the boss says, or he doesn't say, you know, he has a conversation, he goes away and presents his decisions, and the employee says, but that's not what we worked on. That's not what we suggested. So I believe he made a mistake. He didn't make upfront, transparent, and clear how this process is going to work. There are two things that are available for discussion. Is it the option and how the decision is made? So are we saying we all going to discuss options, or are we saying the boss is suggesting the options and you can discuss them? Yeah, so there's like, before I have options for this, and are the options, how do I get to the options?
Mm-hmm.
And the next level is, well, you might define all the available options, but I as the boss make the decision. Or we all make the decision together, or you make the decision. I mean, in a normal company, there is no kind of base democratic kind of decision making. But what I often find frustrating for people is they don't know the rules of the game. So they have an expectation that when you ask them for feedback or you ask them for process input, you know, you have a process facilitation workshop, and they come up with all their ideas, and the boss says, oh, thank you very much, I'll do it my way anyway. So what I do, you know, because you mentioned, you know, you're standing up there and say, you know, you invited, I make clear the rules of engagement. Sometimes I say, we really like to get your opinion on this. However, the boss will still make the decision, and it might not include anything of what you say.
Yeah.
At least they say, bugger, again, one of those, but at least they know what's coming.
Yeah.
Or I say, listen, this was the last project. And I said to the guys, we had done basically a whole, who are our stakeholders, what should we be offering, who are our customers with the management circle. And management decided, okay, let's involve all our divisional kind of head of departments, 13. And we said, we're going to do that. And I said to the guys, the boss has decided, or management has decided, and it costs you that much of money. I told them how much it cost. It was a lot of money, and said, only because management decided we want to involve you. That means, if you're not coming up with ideas, I am, as a consultant, might be at the end accountable for that. I will I'll fill the gap. You might not like it. If you're filling and defining everything, I'm not stepping in. But at the end, whatever you don't do, I will do. But then, you don't have a right to say. So it's your opportunity now to actually, over the next 3 months, contribute and be part of the workshops. Because if you're not doing it, I'm doing it. So it was like there was a third level. There was like the consultant also has a say in a way.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to present to management. And management will have the final call. When they didn't really like it too much, the first half an hour, There was some internal debates, is this right and fair and all this. Like, listen, this is your opportunities for the last, and I showed him some service. You always said you want to be more involved in what management does. This is your opportunity. So it's about being frank and honest and standing up for what the rules of engagement are. And I think being transparent is helpful. So this is one
Absolutely.
of those tools you can use.
And how did that particular workshop turn out? So the first half an hour was difficult, but what happened after that?
There was one person who almost like questioned, but we should be doing it differently. And I said, well, it's not up for debate.
There's always one of those.
Yeah. No, I was quite direct and said, listen, I can't force you to stay here, but I will not change the approach because management has decided this is the approach. If you don't like it, then you need to take it up with with management, because I'm just, I'm just the messenger in a way. I'm the facilitator. I can't force you. I can just tell you you're missing out on a great process, because we have done it twice with management and the middle layer, and they all loved it, and they were actually quite happy to contribute, and they enjoyed, having free brainstorming sessions. And I can't force you to stay. I will tell you that if you're leaving, then I'm not sure if management wants to invite you the next time. So I'm also there quite direct and frank, and the people almost like they appreciated not the harshness but the honesty around it, and say, okay, we might not directly like, but actually he has a point, and we keep on talking about we want to get involved, this is our opportunity, let's grab it. And they actually turned out to be really excited. I mean, we always take videos and take pictures for the whole journey throughout the workshops. And we have a great kind of journey book over those 3 months of project work. And they got engaged. I mean, we had, at one stage, we have like an expo with all people from the company involved, and we had 62% of all people of the company actually attending this workshop. Those expos.
That's fantastic.
So it turned out, it was good.
That's fantastic. And did the boss follow through on his promise? So or her promise? I'm sorry, and pick solutions that were developed by the group, or did they just come up with their own ones and
No, actually they used the ones potentially. I'm not sure if they would have been so comfortable doing their own thing. They were quite happy that what the group developed actually would fit and would make sense for them. So actually now they were consistent in their communication, in their actioning, to say, we will consider what you have done. It's still our decision. Okay. I think one or two things they said no to. Yeah. And I think it was also maybe good to actually say no, because then you're actually also walking the talk.
Absolutely. 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 That makes a lot of sense. Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much. Before, I've taken up a lot of your time, but before, let's talk about your book. So you published Tools for Project Management, Workshops and Consulting in 2005 in English, is that right?
Yes, and the English version is now in the 2nd edition, and the German version is in the 4th edition. Okay. Basically the same content, but the German version was selling a bit faster, so I did a few reprints.
Okay. And how's it structured? What was your aim, your mission with this book?
Well, right at the beginning, as a junior consultant, I was looking for books that tell me about the trade, and there's no book. There's no book out there that actually talks about the basic consulting skills. I use as a reference book a systems engineering book that is around problem solving, and I use that as my skeleton, or like my framework for the approach. So basically it's a problem solving approach consisting on 4 simple steps, and you can use that for planning your wedding or changing an organizational structure. It's all about, I'm not happy. I mean, basic thing is about problem solving is you have a state where you're not happy, and you have a solved state, and the way to get there is about, number 1, defining where you are. It's almost like a journey. Yeah. You define where you want to go. 3rd step, analyze, find options how to get there. And the 4th step is make the decision which option is most suitable. So the whole process, or all the tools, are actually in categories underneath those 4 steps. Okay. So the first step is the diagnosis, where I am. So it's a situation analysis or situation diagnostics or definition. So some of the tools I mentioned are sitting in those categories of tools. There are 10 categories, There's situation, different information gathering, information consolidation, different analysis, strategic or technical analysis, decision making, creativity. These are the categories of tools, and tools are sitting in those categories. So typically, when you're on a project, you need to first realize, what phase am I? Am I in the definition phase? I'm first trying to understand what's in and out of scope, who are the people, what should we be doing? Or am I rather at the end of the phase? I mean, typically you are at the final presentation, and then people say, well, let's do brainstorming on how to take this, what to take a decision on. It's like, no, brainstorming is expanding new things. You need to kind of consolidate stuff. You need to kind of narrow down. Yeah. So you'll find the tools for that in that category. So basically it's almost like a cookbook where you have, if in a cookbook, you know what you want to cook, a dessert or a starter or a main course, a soup or something. You go in the right category, and within that category you find the right menu or the right dish. Very similar to that, is it about, do I need a creativity tool or decision-making tool? I go into that category, and there are certain criteria that actually helps you to select those tools. And each tool is like a recipe. When would you use it? What does it do? Instruction, how to do it. A cross-referencing about when you do this, don't forget you should have used this before and you should use this afterwards. So in the expectation management tool, and the cross-references says, well, when you use this at the end of the project, use the boost ball tool at the end of the project, and the boost ball tool is under this, whatever category.
Okay, so it's leading you through the journey of a project.
It's leading you through the journey, but it's not a project management logic. It's a problem-solving logic, as the overarching framework.
Yeah, and there's 120 tools.
There's 120 tools at the moment. I'm kind of permanently on the hunt for new ones.
Of course. And well, hopefully WorkshopBank will be able to help you with that.
Would be nice.
And the new book. Tell me a little bit about that. I know you're right on deadline.
Yes, I hope my publisher is not listening to that. I'm seriously overdue. So each tool. So basically, the first book is about the hard skill, analysis, market analysis, project management things. The second book is on the soft skills. So realizing that, yes, you can nicely define everything, but there's still a human being involved, and a human being has fears, emotions, conditioning, upbringing, beliefs, and unless you kind of have a way of addressing them, it's very difficult to really kind of move forward. So the new book, it's tools for, the jargon words is leadership, coaching, and change management, and it has a similar logic. You also have, I use 3 levels. So it's about having a relationship with yourself, with other people, or the organizations. So again, we have tools, the same tools with a similar logic grouped into categories, and those categories belong to those either level 1, 2, or 3. So the example is, you're at work, your boss walks in the morning, and he's like, you can see he's furious, he's steaming, and your first thought is, oh, what have I done wrong? So, I mean, if a person or a coach would work on you on that, he would not analyze that, but he would actually help you. He would use a tool to make explicit, is this about you and yourself, you and the other person, or you and the organization? And there it might actually come up that, it has nothing to do with your boss. He might just crash his car or has a fight with his wife or something. This is about your own inner assumptions, your own inner world.
Yeah.
So you would use tools that are sitting in the category on the first level
to help the person visualize why they're feeling those emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I have this mantra of those 3 steps are: be aware that you're doing it. Secondly, cognitively understand what's happening. And as a third step, you can then make the right decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so the person needs to be first aware that they're not instinctively reacting and getting sweaty and running out or calling the husband to kind of vent their frustration or fear. This is about becoming aware, that's what's happening. I'm doing it again. So it's like catching yourself when you're doing it.
Yeah.
The second step, and this is where the tools come in with those models, cognitively understand, Is this me? Is this him? You know, is there a reason? Where is it coming from? And then the third step is like, what is it I could be doing? You know, so once I understand this actually has nothing to do with me, I've done my work properly. Yes, I make mistakes, but you know, there's no reason for that. Maybe as a conscious decision, as in the third step, I stand up, go to the boss, bring him his preferred cup of coffee or tea, and say, "What happened? Can I help you?" You know, instead of actually shying away and hiding in the corner and hoping he's not finding you, and the whole morning you're kind of worrying that you're going to be hit with a stick where there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it all sounds so, in theory, also nice, but you know.
Yeah. Some people just like being hit with sticks. What can I say? And so, and is the focus? I mean, that particular example is much more of a kind of an inner personal emotional.
Yes. It's
journey.
an intrapersonal.
Is that what the whole book's about, or is there anything about the group as well?
No, absolutely. I mean, so there are 8 categories. The first 2 categories are more about the inner space, and then there are categories about teamwork, team dynamics, how to relate and work with others. Some of them are a bit more about the formal elements, and other things about the informal elements. Like the informal stuff is the stuff you can't really, you can't really see. I mean, the formal stuff is the org chart, and the informal stuff is the relationship in between, the informal networks, the power maps, and all those things. So there are many tools. I mean, at the moment there are 80 tools, but the aim is for 400 tools. For other areas, leadership things, coaching things. I mean, these are the big buzzwords. I'm aware of them. Yeah. But a lot of the tools are fitting in those categories. Yeah. And can you as well as change management.
And can you give me one more example of maybe a group working tool?
Well, group working tools. I mean, under the level of this me and the others, there's a motivational element. Yeah. There's some motivation tools. There are team interaction tools. I'll give you one out of the motivation one. Perfect. That is, which is a bit of theory element. So they are the 5 levels of power. Okay, because motivation is also to be able to motivate others, you need power. A lot of people, including myself, for a long time I had this stigma about, you know, power abuse. No, there's more to that. So the tool is based on the 5 levels or the 5 versions of power you have. You have a power out of coercion. You have a power out of your position. And with those powers, you need to actually think, is the power within or is it the power over another person? Okay. Okay. So you have a power out of an expertise.
Power within. What do you mean by power within?
A power within is, for example, the power of knowledge.
Okay. So like a personal.
It's a personal power.
Does it make me feel powerful? Does it? Okay.
Yes. Opposite to, if you have a power out of your position, you have a delegation power over another person. You know, just like when the boss says, well, I can tell you and you must do it. But you actually thinking, you're not powerful, but you can just make me do it. So okay. So the thing is, I mean, understanding the 5 powers in theory is not helping you much, but it's understanding that you have different powers. And then the exercise would be, well, what are the powers I believe I have? Or what are the powers I use with other people at work? But what are the powers I use with my kids, with my wife? You know, so is there charismatic, is there a relationship power, which is more about, you know, people are following other people, not because they are by position or by knowledge, but because the way they are. So this is relationship power. So the charismatic leaders have a relationship power. People don't follow them because they are the boss, because they somehow resonate with them. So this is a tool you can use to say, well, how do I exert what powers do I use? What powers do other people use with me? And once you become aware and you understand what's happening, you can make a decision to consciously engage or disengage certain powers, or use them more or less. You know, do I use coercion power with my kids? Is this the best way of doing it? What kind of power do I use with my partner?
Yeah.
Maybe it becomes a little bit tricky now, but
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely I'd definitely be able to. I'd love to dig into that tool a lot more and analyze my powers with my kids. At the moment, I don't feel like I have any power over them at all. But
I tell you because I'm your daddy.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'm just using the wrong type of power. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Well, Nicolai, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview. Thank you for being an excellent guest, and I look forward to reading your book and seeing it when it comes out, hopefully soon.
Very much so. Well, let me start right away with continue the manuscript.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Nicolai. All the best.